guys, it's Teresa and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read during the month of April, and I read a total of 10 books. Let's get into it because, you know, 10 books, a lot to talk about. So I'm just going to go from top to bottom, the first book that I read to the last book that I read. And the first book that I read in the month of April, apparently, was an arc, and that is The Lost Carnival, a Dick Grayson novel written by Michael Morecki, Saz Miladej, and Phil Hester, who are the two illustrators. This is, I believe, a middle grade novel, or late middle grade, really early young adult, following kind of the spin on Dick Grayson's origin story before he met Batman. And it's basically like him about 16, 17 years old, still touring as a Flying Grayson with his parents and just kind of questioning whether or not he wants to continue on with being in the circus and wanting to have a normal life, and he kind of runs into some magic and some things happen. This comes out, I believe it's already out. Yeah, it comes out on May 5th, so it should already be out by then. I got this arc from NetGalley, if I haven't mentioned, so thank you NetGalley for giving me this arc. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this spin on Dick Grayson's origin story. I thought that it's a really nice, refreshing twist. It doesn't involve kind of a darker aspect to a very young life. Something that I think younger audiences can enjoy a little bit more, especially if you are reaching that stage in life when you're kind of questioning what you want to do versus what your parents are kind of wanting you to do, and all that fun stuff. I love the illustrations. I thought that using the colors to kind of illustrate Dick's feelings on the circus that he's in, plus the Lost Carnival, really set the tone and the mood and made it very interesting to read. My biggest thing I believe that I had with this book, let me check my notes. I didn't explain exactly what I had disliked, which is odd for me. But I think it was just that it was just a very simple book at its finest. It's like very quick and easy. It's not super in-depth, if that makes sense, and I feel like there were some aspects that were definitely very insta-lovey. Like, I understand insta-love to some extent because, you know, he is 16 and you do fall in love really quickly at that age. However, I think that given that it's about him kind of getting lost and trying to find his way and like figuring out where he wants to be in this world, I think the romance aspect shouldn't have played a big role in this graphic novel. But I do enjoy this installment, and if there are going to be future installments, don't mind picking it up and seeing where that goes from there. During the month of April/March, I also participated in PhilMyth Readathon. So this is going to be my wrap-up. The first book that I ended up reading for PhilMyth Readathon was Heretics Anonymous by Katie Henry. This is a YA contemporary book following Michael as he, an atheist, goes to a Catholic school. He watches as someone gets in an argument with one of the nuns at school about like Catholicism and like the history of the saints, and thinks that she is an atheist when in reality she wants to become a priest. There he finds a group of friends who don't necessarily fit the classic Catholic kind of stereotype, and they form a club, or he joins a club called Heretics Anonymous, where they start to kind of question the double standards that the school is putting on them, as well as kind of what it means to be actually tolerant of other people. Also, trigger warnings for this book before I forget, because I actually wrote it down. There is homophobia in this book, because, you know, Catholicism. There is some slut shaming, jokes about religion. The jokes, I feel like you can, if you are a religious person, you could probably like want to take that like with a grain of salt. And then some inappropriate talks about someone else's body, like very lustful thoughts, and kind of like sometimes borderline creepy and just meh. I ended up giving this a 5 out of 5 stars. This is definitely a comedy book. There are some comedic aspects that I think were very interesting, and I liked it. I liked Michael's voice. I think that his voice as a teenager is very clear. It doesn't read like an adult trying to write a teenager. It reads like a teenager writing his own day-to-day life and the angst that comes with it and not being heard by his parents. It was a really nice backdrop for all the comedic aspects of this book. Overall, this book had a lot of good commentary, basically on kind of Catholicism and the things that need to change within the church, as well as how some schools and people tend to misconstrue that to fit their own kind of agenda. And it definitely teaches a thread of tolerance and acceptance underneath this entire situation that's going on with these books. Like I said, 5 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend it. I think that even if you're not Catholic, or if you are Catholic and you are deeply Catholic, you can still take something away from this. Like I said, very healthy representation of friendships in here. From the beginning, it was very healthy to all the way to the end. I think the characters, even from the very minor and flat ones, got some development, and we got to hear more about them and their lives, and it just opened up a lot of topics about just what it means to actually be tolerant and what it means to be accepting when that's what your religion preaches and you don't necessarily fit in that mold of what they accept and what they tolerate. The only thing that I have to say that I had a problem with this book is that sometimes Michael, he is a teenager, and I understand that teenage boys tend to just kind of like the love, like very lustful kind of thoughts toward one of the characters. And while I understand because he is a teenage boy and like hormones are running wild, I felt like sometimes it was a little heavy-handed and it kind of drew away from the comedic aspect of the scene that Katie Henry was trying to portray and just made it kind of creepy. So that was the only thing I really didn't like. I feel like if she had taken out a couple of like lines within that realm, I would have enjoyed this book and given it like a 6 out of 5 stars or something, but highly recommend. The next book that I read in the month of April was Ilustrado by Miguel Ciuco. This was another book that I chose for PhilMyth Readathon, and I bumped this book down from 3 stars to 2 stars. As you can tell, I tabbed it because I thought it was going to be interesting. Basically, this is an adult literary fiction novel. I thought it was going to be more mystery, where Miguel's mentor, Crispin Salvador, his body floats up on the Hudson River, and he kind of wonders why. And there's also a missing manuscript involved, so he ends up going back to the Philippines to find this missing manuscript and finds out more about himself throughout the course of this book. Like I said, I thought this was going to be more of a mystery book just because the synopsis read like a mystery. Not at all that. I can see the literary merit behind this book and I can see sort of why it won the award that it did. However, I feel like there were aspects of this book that I just could not get into. One of them being that I didn't realize I needed a dictionary when I was going to read this book. Like, genuinely did not know that. There are words in here that I feel like it was like trying to sound like he was this intelligent character, and it just came off that he was pretentious. You know that classmate in your like intro to English lit classes or something, or intro to lit and theory classes, where they should just use astonishingly large words with definitions that aren't necessarily the most clear, just to sound more intelligent, when in reality they sound like the most pretentious prick out there. That's that. I also felt like the intercalary chapters didn't make much sense and didn't tie up the entire novel. It was like a weird commentary on like what it means to be Filipino without having been in the Philippines, and what that means to come back and have that like sense of like judgment and criticism on your shoulders. But just how it was written and the length of the chapters really made it hard to get in the groove of this novel and really try to understand exactly what was going to be thrown out there and the entire message. And then the ending was also a little bit weird and kind of like rushed, and there's like a weird love story thing. That wasn't really a love story, but it wanted to read like a love story, and then the weird parallel between him and Crispin, and I don't know, man, I don't know. The good thing that I liked about this book was that it really kind of showed the loss of identity of the Philippines. I say this as someone who has immigrated away from the Philippines at a young age and doesn't have a lot of knowledge of her homeland as much as she would like anymore, but having friends who have immigrated from the Philippines to America, or just seeing full-on adults kind of move here. I say this lovingly, but you get the sense that the Philippines is trying to be too many things at once just because it's what's relevant and what's new, rather than just kind of accepting their own culture and their own history, which I know is a struggle for Filipinos now than they are, as well as it was back then. So you can definitely sense that kind of lost aspect within this novel, where you meet Filipinos who are like trying to be a little too much, or trying to really like get a grip on their actual culture and what that means, and it's just kind of like just feeling lost, I think, is what I was trying to get from this. I also liked how it showed like the Philippines culture in a good way and in a bad way, in terms of like what I said, that judging, harsh, critical side, but also kind of like that really strong familial connections and that really just intense like platonic relationships that we tend to create within one another. But other than that, was not enough to really redeem this book for me, which is really sad because this has been haunting my TBR for a while, and I bumped it down from a 3 to a 2. So the next 2 books, one of them I read for the PhilMyth, the other one I did not, but since they're, you know, together, it makes sense. And that is The Hunger Games and Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins. This is the first 2 books in the Hunger Games trilogy, and we follow Katniss Everdeen as she volunteers to be part of the Hunger Games to protect her sister Prim, and then Catching Fire follows the events directly after that, where we see her become this revolutionary figurehead. I gave them both 5 out of 5 stars. I can see why I love these books so much as a young adult. For Hunger Games, it went by a lot faster than I thought it was gonna be, considering we were stuck in Katniss's head for the majority of this book. And when I mean stuck, I mean she is literally the only character who we hear from for like more than half of this novel, which I thought it was gonna end up going by a little bit slower because I remember the movie going by slower, but I guess it makes more sense that the book goes by pretty quickly because we are in her head and her thoughts are continuing, whereas in the movie, Jennifer Lawrence can only do so much. The second book I also gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. This is my favorite book out of the entire trilogy. I think just because it does illustrate a bit more of Panem to us, a bit more of the world building around them, and how that's affecting everyone, and kind of the basis of this revolution starts with Katniss and what it means, as well as just seeing more of Katniss as a teenager and just trying to make her way throughout this really shitty thing that happened to her. And she thought that she was going to be done and she could just make the best out of the situation. Nope. The next book that I read for PhilMyth was Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. This is the sequel to This is the sequel to Six of Crows, and also finishes off the Six of Crows duology. This follows the events directly after Six of Crows, where things happen. But if you guys don't know, Six of Crows is a heist story following these 6 characters who should not work well together at all, but they're trying to break someone out of prison for the biggest heist of all time. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I think that in terms of Leigh's writing, as someone who has read most of her works consecutively, this is like the peak of her work, right? As for my knowledge, until I read like King of Scars and Ninth House and all that stuff. I really enjoyed this book. It kept me going. I wanted to keep reading, and the character development was wonderful. From the relationships, both romantic and platonic, was absolutely phenomenal. It really just kind of shows me how much she's grown as a writer from the original trilogy to now. And like the prose was amazing. I really enjoyed her dive. I say dive, like it sounded like she's doing it loose, like nonchalantly. How she wrote trauma, and how she wrote trauma in relationships and like budding romances, because it wasn't that trope where we see them heal each other. We like heal each other and like fall in love and like all that gushy stuff. Instead, we see them walk side by side together and heal as separate people and help each other heal without being the sole reason for their healing. And I really enjoyed that, and I cannot wait to see King of Scars and see what kind of other world that she has planned, and see how trauma in that aspect will work, and how she has developed those characters. But also, I heard around the rumor mill that she's thinking of a 3rd Six of Crows book, and like, I need it. But overall, this was a really satisfying conclusion to the duology, and the duology has officially hit my favorite books of like 2020. The last book that I read for the PhilMyth Readathon, another disappointment, and that is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This is an adult high fantasy novel basically following dragons, and it's queer. I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars. If you guys don't know, this has been in my TBR for the past 2-3 months now. Sarah from String Bean Books and I have been reading through this book as a buddy read, and we should have DNF'd it. I had high hopes for this just because this book is like a dragon story. It's a high fantasy. It's pretty accessible in terms of being able to read it. It's not like overly flowery or unnaturally descriptive or whatever. But my problems was that, one, we lack a lot of dragon content for a book that talks about dragons and has a dragon on the cover. It has multiple dragons on the cover. Secondly, I feel like there was a lot of instances where things were just not explained. And this book has 827 pages. There's a glossary and an index in the back, which you think would make things easier, but they somehow made it harder, because I guess when you put like an index and a glossary in the back, it implies that it does not need to be referenced or explained at all within the text. Like, you have to keep referencing back to the glossary and the index to make sense of the world, which is not something that I want to do. And even though we took breaks in between reading this book, I have taken breaks between reading books before, and it has never hindered my ability to know exactly what is going on within the novel. However, when I took even maybe a week break, because Sarah and I were waiting to catch up with each other, we had instances where we literally did not know what the heck was going on and what the world necessarily implied. Like, I don't know why they didn't like dragons. I don't know why the Nameless was such a bad person. I don't know exactly the process of what happened to the jewel or the witch. It's just there was a lot of aspects that I was expecting to come together at the end that never came together. Ever. And it was so upsetting because this was one of my highly anticipated novels, and it ends up being pretty disappointing. Pretty damn disappointing. Let's see, what else did I say? Because I need to let off some steam. The last thing that I did not like was the ending. I feel like the ending, everything was supposed to come to this huge battle, and it was going to be so amazing, and brrr, and then you get to the ending, and it was eh. Like, I feel like the actual battle itself that was supposed to culminate and like satisfy this entire long journey with this book happened in like the span of like 2 pages. Like, the big battle happened in 2 pages, and I don't exactly know what happened inside that said battle. And then the ending itself was really eh. Like, the couple that I had been waiting to get together and have a happy ending, spoiler alert, literally have to spend 10 years apart before they can be together. Like, genuinely, Sarah and I were talking about it, and there were instances where we were like, this star does not need to be in this book. Like, this scene doesn't need to be here. We need a different explanation here in this book that was not explained, and we just wanted to DNF it. Like, genuinely wanted to DNF it. If I'm being very truthful, we'll probably unhaul this. The next 2 books are part of another read-along, and that is with my friends, the Messy Musketeers. We decided to reread through the entire Shadowhunter-verse, and we are currently now on City of Glass. But that is City of Bones and City of Ashes by Cassandra Clare. These are the first 2 installments that started the entire Shadowhunter universe. And we follow Clary Frey as she finds out that she's not human, but she's actually a Shadowhunter, which are these half angel, half human beings destined to kill demons and keep the world safe. I gave the first book 4 out of 5 stars. I definitely enjoyed this book a lot. It's kind of like the start to everything in terms of like how I want to be a writer and like kind of how I want to write books, essentially. So it holds a very special place in my heart, and I think the writing is very nice. Very nice. Is good for what it is, considering Cassie's debut novel. I ended up giving City of Ashes a 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it. I think there are some scenes that definitely redeem this book. However, my biggest issue with this book is that I don't think the incest plot should have lasted as far as it did. The first book I understand because it is kind of a twist and kind of shows Valentine's like demented mind, but I feel like they should have found out in this book and like kept them separate and like had Clary date Simon genuinely, rather than having Clary date Simon because she couldn't be with Jace. And it was just icky and sticky and gross, and like I know they're not actually related, but I'm still feeling very icky and sticky and gross with the thought that they were both okay with being together despite them potentially being siblings at some point in this novel. No. Cassie Clare diddly done us dirty. Diddly done us dirty. But overall, I really enjoyed these 2 books and would recommend the overall series. I would just, be wary of the messages within these 2 books. And the last book that I read in the month of April is actually another arc, and that is out now. Queer We Go Again. It's the sequel anthology series to All Out, which is stories about queer teens coming out and whatnot, and I believe this one takes more of a fantastical element in some aspects. This one comes out, I believe, May 26th. I could be wrong. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. I haven't read the first original anthology, and I don't know how in my brain I did not put 2 and 2 together that they were connected. So there were definitely some instances, which I don't think they have the same authors, but there were definitely instances where I felt like this book had too much of a juvenile attempt to it. I feel like some of the authors were trying too hard to be like super teenager-y sounding and super try to be relatable, that the teenagers just read really, they didn't read like teenagers really to me. They read more like middle schoolers with how their reactions were, because that's how I feel like the authors were trying to get them across. like I said, I enjoyed this book. I think there are some short stories that stand out a little bit more than others. There were definitely instances, which I feel like is fair for every short story collection, where you get in the groove of reading and then you hit a wall, and then you have to like get back in the groove of reading again with this book because you didn't like a short story or something, or didn't vibe with you that well. But I feel like for this one, I didn't enjoy the aspects that were contemporary within this book, because I feel like there was a lot of fantastical and sci-fi elements in this book that I really enjoyed, and I would have worked had we gotten the full scope of everything, just full fantastical and sci-fi elements in here. But the contemporary aspects were definitely the wall that I kept hitting, and kind of kept me from giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars or even the full 5. But overall, I enjoyed it. I highly recommend this book. I'm sure you'll probably enjoy this anthology if you had read the previous one, but I'm a doo-doo brain and I apparently didn't put 2 and 2 together, even though they sound similar, the covers, yeah. But that is it for the books that I read during the month of April. What books did you guys end up reading? Any arcs I should keep an eye out for that are coming out soon? Any books that I should definitely avoid? If you guys have read these books before, please let me know your thoughts down below. Other than that, hit like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys in my next video, which I don't remember what that one is. We'll find out when we get there. But until then, I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you guys everywhere else. Bye.